When Margaret turned 85, she often found herself avoiding mirrors. Her once bright skin had faded into something she didn't recognize. Dry patches, lines carving deep stories across her cheeks, and a sagging jawline that seemed to weigh her smile down. She wasn't looking for magic or miracles, just something honest, simple, and kind to her skin. What she didn't expect was that the answer had been in her home all along, sitting quietly at the back of her cupboard: castor oil and baking soda. It was her granddaughter, Emily, a nurse with a curious mind and a gentle heart, who introduced her to the idea. "Grandma," she said one evening, holding out a small glass bottle, "this costs less than your morning coffee, but it might just change the way you see yourself again." Skeptical, but with little to lose, Margaret agreed to give it a try. No needles, no appointments, just a soft cloth, warm water, and this mysterious oil she hadn't used since her own mother applied it to her scalp when she was a child. What made castor oil so special, Emily explained, was its richness in ricinoleic acid, a fatty compound that not only moisturizes but also encourages the skin to produce more collagen. Collagen, the invisible web that holds our skin firm, is something we lose gradually with age, leaving behind loose and creased textures. Most expensive creams on the market aim to mimic what this natural oil does effortlessly. Yet here it was, in its purest form, ready to be rediscovered. The ritual became a moment of peace. Each night, after brushing her teeth, Margaret would cleanse her face gently, warm a few drops of castor oil between her fingers, and press it softly into her skin. No rubbing, no rushing. At first, it felt thick, almost too rich, but within minutes, it melted in, leaving a velvety layer that seemed to soothe not just her skin, but her spirit. By the end of the third week, Margaret noticed something subtle, but undeniable. Her skin looked calmer, brighter, more like it belonged to the woman she still felt herself to be on the inside. Her daughter even asked, with a teasing smile, if she'd secretly visited a clinic. But there had been no surgeon, no serum, just a quiet return to something honest and deeply human. A reminder that beauty isn't always about invention. Sometimes it's about rediscovery. Margaret had never thought much about the science behind aging. Wrinkles, she used to say, were just life's handwriting. Marks of laughter, sorrow, long winters, and warm kitchens. But over time, those marks stopped feeling like stories and began feeling like a mask she couldn't take off. It wasn't just about vanity. Her skin had become dry, papery, even uncomfortable. Makeup no longer sat right, and moisturizers that once worked seemed to vanish without a trace. It was during one of her phone calls with Emily that she finally asked, "Why does my skin feel so different now? I do the same things I always have." Emily paused, then gently explained something Margaret had never heard before. After age 50, the skin's deeper layer, the dermis, begins to thin dramatically, losing up to 20% of its volume each decade. Even more shocking, the skin's natural oil production can decrease by as much as 60% by the time a person reaches 70. "That's why it feels like nothing helps," Emily said. "It's not that your products are wrong. It's that your skin isn't producing the same protective oils it used to." Suddenly, it all made sense. The tight feeling after washing her face, the flakiness, the way her cheeks no longer held moisture, they were signs of a barrier slowly wearing away. That's when Emily reminded her of castor oil's second gift. Beyond stimulating collagen, its fatty acids deeply nourish and restore the skin's natural barrier, helping it retain moisture and resilience. Margaret began applying the oil each evening, not just to her face, but to her neck and even her hands. She took care to use only cold-pressed oil, always stored in a dark glass bottle to protect its potency. The scent was faintly earthy, comforting even. She liked the routine, washing her face with lukewarm water, patting it dry with her softest towel, and gently pressing in the oil with her fingertips. The process felt less like a beauty regimen and more like self-respect. By the second week, the dryness eased. Her skin, while still wrinkled, no longer felt fragile. It was firmer to the touch, smoother, more alive. The discomfort disappeared, replaced by a quiet confidence she hadn't felt in years. She no longer needed to hide behind scarves or turn down invitations because of how she felt in her own skin. Margaret wasn't trying to look younger. She simply wanted to feel comfortable in her own reflection. And for the first time in a long while, she did. Aging hadn't stopped. But now, it felt like something she could walk through with grace. Margaret had never thought dead skin could be the reason her face looked so dull. She blamed the lighting in her bathroom mirror, the long winters in Ohio, even her age. But one morning, as she looked at her reflection in the soft morning light, she saw something new. It wasn't just wrinkles. It was a kind of grayness, a lack of life in her skin that even the castor oil couldn't fully revive. "I think it's time for a gentle reset," Emily said, visiting with a small jar in hand. "You've nourished the deeper layers. Now we help the top ones let go." Inside the jar was something entirely unassuming. Baking soda. Margaret was puzzled. She used that for cleaning her sink and sometimes to freshen the fridge. Could it really have a place in skincare? Emily explained that after 60, the skin naturally slows down its cell renewal. Old skin cells tend to cling to the surface longer, creating a barrier that blocks even the best moisturizers from reaching the living tissue beneath. Without gentle exfoliation, skin can appear flat, uneven, and older than it really is. "You don't need harsh scrubs," Emily assured. "You just need a touch of help to sweep away what's already done its job." Margaret watched as Emily mixed half a teaspoon of baking soda with a few drops of water in a porcelain bowl, forming a soft, smooth paste. She dipped 2 fingers into the mixture and applied it in slow, circular motions to Margaret's cheek. The sensation was curious, grainy yet not rough, like brushing silk with fine sand. "Be extra careful around your eyes," Emily reminded. "That skin is thinner than paper." After 30 seconds, they rinsed it off with cool water. Margaret looked in the mirror again, and this time she saw something brighter. Her skin felt refreshed, almost as if it could breathe again. She began adding the paste to her routine once a week. It became a moment of quiet reflection. No rushing, no pressure, just care. Her fingers learned to move more gently, her touch more respectful. With each session, her skin grew more receptive to the oil that followed. The combination brought balance. The soda cleared the path. The oil brought life. Within a few weeks, her complexion no longer looked tired. The dull layer had lifted, revealing softness beneath. Margaret hadn't changed, but her skin, finally freed from what no longer served it, began to reflect the vibrance she still felt inside. By now, Margaret's routine had become a cherished ritual. Simple, calming, and surprisingly effective. But it wasn't until Emily suggested combining the castor oil and baking soda that something truly remarkable began to unfold. "This is where the real magic happens," Emily said, one Sunday afternoon as they sat by the window with teacups in hand. On their own, both ingredients work well, but together, they help each other do more. Margaret tilted her head, intrigued. "Like a duet?" Exactly, Emily smiled. The baking soda gently opens the way by loosening the outermost layer of dead skin. It temporarily softens the barrier, allowing the oil to sink deeper, where real regeneration takes place. The first time Margaret tried the combination, she followed Emily's instructions precisely. 1 teaspoon of cold-pressed castor oil, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. She mixed them slowly until the paste was smooth, then applied it gently to her clean skin with her fingertips. The mixture felt slightly gritty at first, but as she spread it across her face, it melted into a soothing balm. She set a timer for 15 minutes. No more, no less. Emily had warned that too much time could irritate mature skin, while too little wouldn't allow the active ingredients to do their work. Margaret sat in silence, eyes closed, listening to the ticking clock and the wind brushing against the windows. It was peaceful, almost meditative. When the timer chimed, she rinsed her face with cool water, carefully patting it dry. Her skin felt tender, alive, like the surface of a well-watered garden after a summer rain. As instructed, she followed up with a few drops of pure castor oil, tapping it into her cheeks and forehead. The second application sealed in the nourishment, like wrapping warm hands around something fragile. By the end of the week, Margaret noticed subtle shifts. Her skin appeared firmer, the lines around her mouth less pronounced. There was a glow, not artificial, but real, like a light turned on from within. Friends began to comment. "You look well rested," someone said at the grocery store. Another remarked, "Your skin looks happy." Margaret laughed at that. But deep down, she understood what they meant. It wasn't just about skin. It was about care, attention, and trust in her own ability to tend to herself. The blend of soda and oil didn't erase the years. It honored them, softening the harshness while letting her inner light come through more clearly. It wasn't until Margaret caught sight of her hands in the morning sun that she realized something important was missing. Her face had started to reflect a softness she hadn't seen in years, but her hands, those capable, weathered hands, looked almost like they belonged to someone else. The skin was thin, the veins more visible, and the knuckles dry and stiff. Even her neck, once graceful and firm, now bore faint creases and a looseness she hadn't noticed before. She brought it up to Emily one evening over tea. "I've been so focused on my face, I forgot about the rest of me," she said, stretching out her fingers. Emily nodded knowingly. "That's something almost everyone does. But the truth is, your neck, hands, and eyes often show age first. They're more exposed, and the skin there is more delicate." Margaret listened carefully as Emily explained that the neck has fewer oil glands and is often overlooked in skincare routines, making it prone to what doctors now call tech neck, fine horizontal lines from years of looking down. The skin around the eyes is thinner than tissue paper, making it especially vulnerable to dryness and wrinkles. And the hands, exposed daily to sunlight, water, and soaps, age even faster than the face. Determined not to ignore these quiet messengers of time, Margaret adjusted her routine. When preparing the castor oil and baking soda blend, she began applying a small amount to her neck first, using slow, upward strokes to gently lift the skin. For her hands, she massaged the mixture into the backs and fingers, letting it sit for 5 extra minutes to allow the ingredients to penetrate the tougher skin. And around her eyes, she made a gentler version, just a whisper of baking soda and more oil, tapping it softly with her ring finger, always mindful of the fragile skin. After rinsing, she applied a final layer of pure castor oil to all 3 areas, paying special attention to her cuticles and the base of her thumbs, where dryness had started to show. Within 2 weeks, there was a quiet transformation. The creases on her neck softened, her hands felt less brittle, and the hollows around her eyes looked calmer, less shadowed. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to feel more like herself, more whole. And when her grandson held her hand during their weekend walk, he said, almost absently, "Your hands feel really soft, Grandma." That single comment was worth everything. It meant she was being seen, entirely. Margaret had always been a morning person. For most of her life, she rose with the sun, brewed a pot of tea, and watched the light spill across her quiet kitchen. But after starting her new skincare ritual, she found herself looking forward to the evenings more than the dawn. There was something sacred about those final hours of the day, when everything slowed down and the house fell into a comfortable hush. Emily had shared something fascinating one evening as they folded laundry together. "Did you know your skin works hardest while you sleep?" she said. "Between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., your body ramps up blood flow to the skin and starts making more collagen. It's like your skin's repair shift." Margaret blinked, surprised. "So, applying the treatment at night makes it more effective?" "Much more," Emily confirmed. "Your skin is more receptive then. It drinks in the good stuff and lets it work while you rest." Margaret took this advice to heart. She adjusted her routine to start an hour before bedtime. She no longer rushed through it, but treated it as part of her wind-down. First came cleansing with lukewarm water. Never hot, as Emily warned that. High temperatures stripped away natural oils. Then, after gently patting her face dry, she mixed her castor oil and baking soda just as she had learned. Carefully, she applied the paste, letting it rest on her skin while she tidied her room or read a few pages from her favorite book. 15 minutes later, she rinsed it off and followed with a thin layer of castor oil, focusing on the places that needed the most attention: her laugh lines, her forehead, the corners of her eyes. She always used upward motions, a small but deliberate act of kindness toward her skin. Soon, Margaret began noticing how much better her skin responded to the treatment when done at night. It absorbed the oil more deeply, stayed hydrated longer, and looked visibly calmer in the morning. But more than that, she noticed how it made her feel. There was a quiet dignity in ending the day with care. It wasn't vanity. It was reverence, a way of saying, "You matter. Even now. Especially now." As she lay in bed, the soft scent of the oil lingering in the air, Margaret often smiled in the dark. She wasn't chasing youth. She was nurturing herself, aligning with her body's own rhythm. And in that rhythm, she found something better than beauty. She found peace. Margaret had learned much in the quiet weeks since she first dipped her fingers into castor oil. But perhaps the most important lesson came not from a bottle or a jar, but from rhythm. The gentle understanding that good things take time and the body, especially as it ages, thrives on patience. At first, she was tempted to do the full treatment every night. The results had been so comforting, so visible, that skipping even one evening felt like a missed opportunity. But Emily, ever thoughtful, sat her down one afternoon and spoke with the same kindness she used with her patients. "Overdoing it can hurt more than help, Grandma," she said softly. "Your skin isn't in a rush. It needs time to rest and rebuild." Emily explained that after 60, the skin's cell turnover slows dramatically. What once took a month now takes nearly twice as long. Exfoliating too often, even gently, could thin the skin's barrier, leaving it vulnerable to dryness, redness, and irritation. "Twice a week is perfect," she assured. That way, the baking soda can do its job without overwhelming your skin. So Margaret made a schedule. Mondays and Thursdays became her treatment nights. She even circled the days on a small calendar by her dresser, not as a chore but as a promise to herself. On those evenings, she would prepare the paste with care, apply it gently, and follow with her nourishing oil. On the other nights, she focused only on hydration, pressing warm drops of castor oil into her skin and letting it settle like a soft veil before sleep. The results, while gradual, were unmistakable. Her skin stopped feeling overworked and instead felt balanced. The texture evened out, and any signs of sensitivity vanished. She felt in tune with her body again, not fighting it, not forcing it, but flowing with its natural pace. One Thursday evening, as she completed her ritual, Margaret caught her reflection and paused. Not because she looked younger, though the lines around her mouth had softened and her skin had regained a quiet glow, but because she looked like herself, familiar, at ease. She smiled and whispered, "Thank you," not to the mirror, but to the care she'd chosen to show herself. Aging hadn't disappeared, but it had changed shape. It was no longer something to battle. It was a path she could walk with intention, grace, and yes, beauty. And perhaps, in learning to wait, to trust the process, Margaret had discovered the true secret all along. Consistency, compassion, and a little oil go a long way.